I heard my daughter's husband whisper, "The pills'll make it look natural." That night, I didn't sleep. I packed my bag, grabbed my heart medicine, and ran. Before I tell you how I survived what they planned, like this video, subscribe to Revenge Stories Journal, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 67 years old, a retired nurse who spent 43 years holding the hands of dying patients and teaching their families how to say goodbye. I never thought I'd need those same skills to recognize when someone was planning my own death. But life has a way of preparing you for moments you never saw coming, doesn't it? I was widowed 3 years ago when my Harold passed from complications after his second stroke. We'd been married 41 years, and suddenly the house felt too big, too quiet, too full of memories that echoed in every corner. My daughter Megan, my only child, my pride and joy, called me every day after the funeral. "Mom, you can't live alone anymore," she'd say. "What if something happens? What if you fall? What if your heart acts up again?" She wasn't wrong to worry. I'd had my first heart episode 6 months before Harold died, and the cardiologist made it clear that my condition would only worsen with time. The medications helped, but they came with their own burdens: dizziness, fatigue, moments where my chest felt like someone was squeezing it in a vice. Living alone started to feel less like independence and more like a gamble I might not win. So when Megan suggested I move in with her and Eric, it felt like salvation wrapped in love. Eric seemed supportive, even enthusiastic about the arrangement. "We have that guest room downstairs," he'd said during one of our family dinners. "It's perfect for you, Eleanor. Close to the kitchen, close to us if you need anything." He smiled, that easy smile of his, the one that made Megan light up whenever she looked at him. The first few months were everything I'd hoped for. Megan would bring me coffee in the mornings, and we'd sit on the back porch watching her twin boys, Tommy and Jake, chase each other around the yard. The laughter of children has a way of healing hearts that medicine never could. I felt useful again, helping with homework, cooking the occasional dinner, being Grandma Eleanor instead of just the old lady living alone on Maple Street. Eric was attentive too, maybe more than I expected. He'd refill my prescriptions without being asked, drive me to doctor's appointments when Megan was busy with the boys, even bring me tea when I had trouble sleeping. "You're family now," he'd say. "This is what family does." And I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. But there were small things that nagged at me, little inconsistencies that my nurse's training wouldn't let me ignore. Eric always insisted on handling my medications personally. When I mentioned I could manage them myself, after all, I'd been a medication nurse for decades, he'd wave me off with a laugh. "Let me take care of you for once, Eleanor. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else." There were locked drawers in the kitchen that Megan claimed held just paperwork, but when I accidentally saw inside one day, it was full of documents I couldn't quite make out before she quickly closed it. Phone calls that stopped abruptly when I entered a room. Letters that arrived addressed to me but somehow never made it to my hands. "Oh, that was just medical billing," Megan would explain, or "just some insurance thing Eric's handling for you." The comfort pills Eric had prescribed through Dr. Morrison were supposed to help me sleep better, ease the anxiety that came with my heart condition. "Just something mild," Eric had assured me. "Dr. Morrison thinks they'll help with your overall stress levels." But they made me groggier than I expected, more confused some mornings than others. When I mentioned this to Megan, she just rubbed my shoulder and said, "Your body's adjusting, Mom. Eric knows what he's doing." Eric worked in medical insurance, you see. He understood medications, dosages, interactions better than most people. It made sense that he'd take an interest in my care. It made sense that he'd want to ensure I was getting the best treatment. It made perfect sense, until it didn't. The first real red flag came on a Tuesday evening in late September. I'd gotten up to use the bathroom around midnight and heard voices from the kitchen below. Eric and Megan were talking in those hushed tones people use when they're discussing something they don't want overheard. Being a nurse teaches you to move quietly when needed, and 43 years of that training doesn't just disappear because you retire. I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart already beating faster than my medication should have allowed. Their words drifted up through the quiet house like smoke, poisonous and undeniable. Dosage adjustments should do it, Eric was saying. We just need to be patient. Are you sure this will work? Megan's voice was strained, worried. What if someone notices? Who's going to notice? She's old, Meg. She has a bad heart. These things happen naturally all the time. But what if the doctor? I handle her medical appointments, remember? I handle her prescriptions. Dr. Morrison trusts me completely. Everything will look perfectly normal. I gripped the banister so hard my knuckles went white. They were talking about me. They were talking about making something look natural. Something that would happen to an old woman with a bad heart. Something that these things, whatever these things were, happened naturally all the time. I made my way back to my room as quietly as I'd left it, but sleep was impossible after that. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood, that there was some innocent explanation for what I'd heard. But my nursing experience had taught me to recognize the signs of danger, and every instinct I'd honed over 4 decades was screaming at me now. The next morning, Megan brought me my coffee as usual, but I watched her face more carefully. Was there something different in her smile? Something forced about the way she asked how I'd slept? When Eric handed me my morning pills, 3 small tablets I'd been taking for months, I found myself studying his expression, looking for any hint of what I'd heard the night before. Feeling okay today, Eleanor? He asked, and his voice sounded exactly the same as always. Concerned. Caring. Son-in-law-like in all the right ways. A little tired, I said, and it wasn't a lie. These pills sometimes make me feel foggy. That's normal, he said quickly. Too quickly. Your body's still adjusting. Dr. Morrison says it can take time to find the right balance. But I'd been taking these pills for months. How long did a body need to adjust? Over the next few days, I started paying attention to things I'd previously taken for granted. The pills Eric gave me each morning did indeed make me feel strange, not just sleepy, but disconnected, like I was watching my own life through a thick pane of glass. My heart medication had never affected me this way before Harold died. I'd been on the same prescription for over a year, and while it had side effects, this level of confusion and disorientation was new. I began to notice that Eric always watched me take the pills. He'd stand there with my morning coffee, chatting about the weather or the boys' school activities, but his eyes never left my hands as I swallowed each tablet. When I mentioned once that I might skip the sleep aid since I'd been feeling so groggy, his response was immediate and firm. Eleanor, you can't just stop taking prescribed medications. That could be dangerous for someone with your condition. Promise me you'll stick to the routine Dr. Morrison set up. The way he said it, so serious, so insistent, made something cold crawl up my spine. Since when did Eric get to tell me what medications I could or couldn't take? Since when did he have more authority over my health than I did? I started doing something I hadn't done since nursing school. I began keeping a detailed log of my symptoms, my medications, and how I felt each day. Old habits die hard, and my training in medical documentation was still sharp even in retirement. What I discovered in that little notebook made my hands shake as I wrote. The days when I felt most confused, most disoriented, most unlike myself, always coincided with Eric personally handing me my pills. On the rare occasions when Megan gave them to me instead, or when I took them directly from the prescription bottles myself, my head stayed clearer. The fog lifted. The strange disconnected feeling faded. Someone was altering my medication. Someone wanted me confused, disoriented, easier to, what? Control. Manipulate. Kill. The thought hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to consider it rationally. Eric had access to my pills. He had medical knowledge through his insurance work. He handled all my prescription refills personally, always insisting it was easier for him to pick them up since he passed the pharmacy on his way home from work. And I'd heard him talking about dosage adjustments, about making something look natural. When I tried to bring up my concerns with Megan, her reaction told me everything I needed to know. She burst into tears the moment I suggested that maybe Eric was too involved in managing my medications. "Mom, how can you say that? Eric loves you. He's trying to take care of you. This is just your anxiety talking. Maybe we need to ask Dr. Morrison about adjusting your medication for that too. More medication adjustments. More pills to make me compliant, confused, easier to handle." And the way she said it, like it was already decided, like she and Eric had already discussed what to do if I started asking inconvenient questions. "Megan, sweetie, I've been a nurse for 43 years. I know what different medications do to the body. Something isn't right with what I'm taking. You're not a nurse anymore, Mom. You're a patient. And patients need to trust their caregivers." The coldness in her voice when she said it made me feel like I was looking at a stranger wearing my daughter's face. This wasn't the Megan who used to crawl into my lap when she had nightmares. This wasn't the Megan who called me crying when she found out she was pregnant with the twins because she was so happy and scared and grateful all at once. This was someone who'd been convinced that her mother was a problem that needed to be solved. Eric began managing all my medical appointments after that conversation, claiming that too much stress wasn't good for my heart condition. When I protested that I was perfectly capable of driving myself to the doctor, he just smiled that same easy smile and patted my hand. "Eleanor, you shouldn't be driving with the medication you're on. It's not safe. What if you had an episode behind the wheel? What if you hurt someone? I'm just looking out for everyone here." But what he was really doing was isolating me. Cutting off my access to medical professionals who might notice something was wrong. Ensuring that any conversation about my health went through him first. My old friends from the hospital stopped visiting as frequently. When I asked Megan about it, she said they'd all been calling to check on me, but she'd told them I was resting more and didn't want to be overwhelmed with visitors. "You said yourself you've been tired lately, Mom. I was just trying to protect your energy." Except I'd never said I didn't want to see my friends. I'd never asked to be protected from the people who cared about me. But somehow, decisions about my life were being made without my input, by people who claimed to know what was best for me better than I did. The atmosphere in the house grew suffocating. Every conversation felt monitored. Every question I asked about my medication or my medical care was met with gentle but firm dismissal. I was being managed, handled, prepared for something I was beginning to understand with growing horror. I started keeping a private journal, hidden in the lining of my old nursing bag where I knew no one would think to look. I also began making copies of my medical reports whenever I could access them, slipping them into my purse during appointments and hiding them with the journal. If something happened to me, I wanted there to be a record of what I'd noticed, what I'd suspected, what I'd tried to tell people. Because I was starting to realize that dying in my sleep wouldn't be an accident. It would be their plan. The whisper that changed everything came on a Thursday night in October. I'd been having trouble sleeping, not unusual, given the stress I was under, and had gotten up around 2 in the morning to make myself some warm milk. As I approached the kitchen, I heard Eric's voice coming from his study, talking on the phone in the kind of hushed tone people use for conversations they don't want overheard. I stopped at the doorway, barely breathing, straining to hear. "It'll look completely natural," he was saying. She's old, she has a documented heart condition, she's been on medication for anxiety and sleep disorders. No one will question it when she just doesn't wake up one morning. There was a pause while the person on the other end spoke, and then Eric continued. The life insurance policy clears in 30 days. 200,000, plus her savings and the equity in her old house. Megan doesn't know about the policy, I handled all that paperwork myself. As far as she knows, we're just trying to make things easier for everyone. My legs nearly gave out. Eric had taken out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge. He was planning my death with the same casual efficiency most people use to plan a vacation. And my daughter, my sweet, trusting daughter, had no idea that her husband was planning to murder her mother for money. I made it back to my room somehow, though I don't remember the journey. I sat on the edge of my bed, trembling not from my heart condition but from pure, crystalline rage. This man had wormed his way into my family, gained my trust, pretended to care about my welfare, all while planning to kill me for an insurance payout I'd never even known existed. But alongside the rage came something else, the cold, calculating precision that had served me well in 43 years of nursing. Eric thought he was dealing with a confused old woman who'd be easy to manipulate and dispose of. He had no idea he was dealing with someone who'd spent decades outthinking death in hospital rooms, someone who'd learned to spot the signs of trouble long before it became critical. If Eric wanted to play the long game, I could play it better. The next morning, I made a decision that went against every instinct I had as a mother and grandmother. I decided to let Eric think his plan was working. When he brought me my morning pills, I took them with a grateful smile, but instead of swallowing them, I tucked them under my tongue and spat them out later in my bathroom sink. When I felt dizzy or confused, I played it up, acting more disoriented than I actually was. "Are you feeling all right, Eleanor?" Megan asked one morning when I pretended to have trouble remembering what day it was. "I'm just tired," I said, letting my voice sound vague and uncertain. "The pills help, but sometimes I feel so foggy." Eric's face when I said this was a masterpiece of false concern. "Maybe we should talk to Dr. Morrison about adjusting your dosage again. We want you to be comfortable." Comfortable. Right up until the moment I stopped breathing in my sleep. But while I was playing the role of the declining old woman during the day, I was working as a retired nurse in the evenings. I called my former colleague Dr. Sarah Lawson, who'd been my closest friend during my years at the hospital. Sarah had always been the sharpest diagnostician I knew, and more importantly, she was someone I could trust completely. "Eleanor, I'm so glad to hear from you," she said when I reached her at home. "How are you settling in with Megan and Eric?" "That's actually why I'm calling, Sarah. I need your help with something, and I need you to keep this conversation completely confidential." I told her everything. The overheard conversations, the medication changes, the insurance policy, the growing isolation from my friends and medical care. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when I finished, there was a long pause before she spoke. "Eleanor, those symptoms you're describing, the increased confusion, the disorientation, they're not consistent with your prescribed medications. Can you get me samples of what you're actually taking?" "I've been thinking the same thing. I've been saving them. The pills Eric gives me versus the ones I take directly from the prescription bottles are different. I want you to bring them to me. Unofficially. Can you manage that?" "I think so. But Sarah, if I'm right about this, then we're going to stop it. And we're going to make sure Eric pays for what he's trying to do." Getting the pills to Sarah required some creative planning. I told Megan I wanted to visit the old hospital to see some friends, which wasn't entirely a lie. She seemed hesitant at first, but when I played up how much I missed my old life, she agreed to drive me. While Megan visited with some of the nurses she knew from my years there, I slipped away to meet Sarah in the pharmacy lab. She examined the pills I'd been saving, both the ones Eric had given me and the ones I'd taken directly from the prescription bottles. What she found made my blood run cold. "Eleanor, these aren't the same medication at all. The pills Eric's been giving you contain a powerful sedative mixed with a heart medication that's completely contraindicated with your current prescription. In the doses you've been receiving, this combination would cause exactly the symptoms you've been experiencing. And if the dosage were increased even slightly, it would stop my heart. And it would look completely natural. Like your existing condition had simply progressed to heart failure. We had our smoking gun, but we needed more than just evidence of the altered medication. We needed proof of Eric's intent, proof of the insurance fraud, proof that this was premeditated murder. I want to set up a recording device in your room," Sarah said. "Something small, undetectable. If Eric's planning to increase the dosage soon, he might reveal more details about his timeline. And what if he decides to move faster than we expect? We'll have backup. I'm going to contact a friend of mine in the police department. Detective Maria Santos, she specializes in elder abuse cases. She'll know how to handle this properly." The recording device was tiny, built into a digital clock that Sarah helped me set up on my bedside table. To anyone else, it would look like a gift from one of my old hospital friends. Eric barely glanced at it when I mentioned that Sarah had brought it by during our visit. For 3 days, the clock recorded nothing but normal household sounds and my own restless nights. I was beginning to wonder if Eric had somehow sensed the trap when he finally made his move. It was a Sunday evening, and Megan had taken the boys to her mother-in-law's house for dinner. Eric claimed he had some work to catch up on and suggested I might want to rest. "You've seemed more tired lately," he said with that false concern I'd learned to recognize. "Maybe take one of your sleep aids and get some good rest." I played my part perfectly, agreeing that I was feeling worn down and could use some extra sleep. But instead of going to my room immediately, I lingered in the hallway outside Eric's study, listening to him make another phone call. "It's happening tonight," he said quietly. "She's been more disoriented lately, more confused. It's the perfect time. If anyone asks, she just took her regular medication and went to sleep. Simple heart failure, completely expected given her condition." There was a pause, and then, "The dosage I'm giving her tonight will be triple what she's been getting. Her heart won't be able to handle it. She'll drift off peacefully and just, not wake up. By the time anyone thinks to do an autopsy, if they even bother, the drugs will have metabolized enough to seem like normal therapeutic levels." Another pause, longer this time. "Megan doesn't need to know the details. As far as she's concerned, her mother passed peacefully in her sleep. The grief will be real, which will make it more convincing. And once the insurance money comes through, we can pay off the house and start fresh somewhere else." I crept back to my room, my heart hammering against my ribs with a rhythm that had nothing to do with my medical condition. Tonight. He was planning to kill me tonight, while my daughter was safely away with the children, while he could administer the fatal dose and then call for help in the morning, playing the devastated son-in-law who'd found his mother-in-law had passed peacefully in her sleep. But I wasn't going to be a victim. Not tonight. Not ever. I called Detective Santos using the number Sarah had given me, speaking in whispers that the recording device would pick up. "Detective Santos, this is Eleanor Hayes. Dr. Lawson should have briefed you about my situation. I believe my son-in-law is planning to kill me tonight. I have evidence, and I need your help. Mrs. Hayes, we've been monitoring your situation since Dr. Lawson contacted me. We have units positioned around your house, waiting for my signal. Are you safe right now?" "For the moment. But he's planning to give me a fatal dose of medication tonight. I heard him confirm it on a phone call just now. We need definitive proof of his intent before we can move. Can you get him to admit what he's planning on record?" "I think so. But you need to be ready to move fast. If something goes wrong. Nothing's going wrong, Mrs. Hayes. You're not going to die tonight. But we need you to be very brave for just a little while longer. An hour later, Eric knocked softly on my door. Eleanor. I brought your evening medication. And maybe some warm milk to help you sleep. Come in, dear, I called, making my voice sound tired and weak. He entered carrying a small tray with my pills and a mug of steaming milk. The pills looked the same as always, but I knew these were the ones meant to kill me. The ones that would stop my heart while I slept and make my death look like the natural progression of my existing condition. You're so good to me, Eric, I said, accepting the tray with hands that trembled only slightly. I know taking care of an old woman like me can't be easy. Don't say that, he replied, and his voice actually sounded sincere. Your family, Eleanor. This is what family does for each other. Family. The word tasted like poison in my mouth. Eric, I said carefully, can I ask you something? If something were to happen to me, if my heart finally gave out, would you and Megan be okay financially? I worry about being a burden, especially with the boys' college funds to think about. His eyes sharpened slightly, and I could almost see him calculating how to respond. You don't need to worry about that, Eleanor. I've made sure everything is taken care of. There's a life insurance policy that would help with any final expenses. A life insurance policy? I don't remember signing anything like that. It's just a small one. I handled the paperwork through my company. Standard procedure for situations like this. He was lying so smoothly, so naturally. The important thing is that you don't need to worry. If something happened, Megan and the boys would be fine. More than fine, actually. How much more than fine? I asked, playing the curious old woman perfectly. Well, it's a substantial policy. $200,000. Enough to pay off the house, set aside money for the boys' education, maybe take that trip to Europe Megan's always talked about. $200,000. I let my voice sound impressed, maybe a little pleased. That's wonderful, Eric. It makes me feel better knowing that my death would at least bring some good things for the people I love. Your death. He laughed, but it sounded forced. Eleanor, you're going to be around for years yet. This is just planning ahead, being responsible. Of course, I agreed. But if it did happen, if I passed in my sleep tonight, for instance, everything would be taken care of? Everything would be perfectly taken care of, he said, and there was something cold in his voice now. You just drift off peacefully, and everyone would say it was natural. No pain, no struggle. Just, a gentle end. That sounds lovely, I said, and meant it in a way he couldn't possibly understand. Almost too good to be true. Nothing too good about it, Eric said quietly. Just the way these things happen sometimes. I held up the pills he'd brought me. These will help me sleep peacefully. They'll help you sleep very peacefully, he confirmed, and now there was no mistaking the anticipation in his voice. Deeper than you've slept in years. Forever. The word hung in the air between us like a blade. Eric's eyes widened slightly, and I saw the moment he realized I knew. That I'd known all along. That the confused old woman act had been exactly that, an act. Eleanor, he said slowly, what exactly are you asking me? I'm asking if these pills will kill me, Eric. I'm asking if you've been planning my murder for weeks, maybe months. I'm asking if you took out that life insurance policy so you could cash in on my death. His face went through a series of expressions, surprise, calculation, and finally, resignation. You can't prove any of that. Can't I? I gestured toward the digital clock on my bedside table. That little recording device has been capturing every conversation in this room for the past week. Including the phone call you made an hour ago, confirming that tonight was the night you were going to kill me. Eric's face went white. You're bluffing. Call Detective Santos and ask her. She's been listening to everything we've said for the past 10 minutes. And right about now, I imagine she's giving the signal for her team to surround the house. As if on cue, we heard the sound of car doors slamming outside, followed by heavy footsteps on the front porch and a commanding voice shouting, "Police! Open the door!" Eric looked from me to the clock to the pills still sitting in my hand. You don't understand, he said desperately. The money, we need that money. Megan doesn't know how deep in debt we are. The house is mortgaged to the hilt, the boys' school tuition is behind, my business is failing. This was the only way to save everything. By killing me. By letting nature take its course a little faster than it might have otherwise. You're going to die anyway, Eleanor. Your heart condition, your age, it's inevitable. I was just speeding up the timeline. And profiting from it. And solving everyone's problems at once. Megan would have been devastated to lose you, but she'd have gotten over it. People do. And the insurance money would have secured the boys' futures, saved our house, given us a fresh start. The front door burst open downstairs, followed by the sound of police officers securing the house. Eric's shoulders sagged in defeat. You know what the really sad part is? I said, setting the deadly pills back on the tray. If you'd just talked to me about your financial problems, I would have helped. I would have given you whatever money you needed, gladly. Because I thought you were family. Detective Santos appeared in my doorway, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Mrs. Hayes, are you all right? I'm fine, Detective. And I believe you'll find everything you need to make your case on these pills and in the recording device. As they cuffed Eric and read him his rights, he looked back at me with something that might have been regret. I never meant for it to be personal, Eleanor. I actually do care about you. No, I said firmly. You cared about what I was worth to you dead. There's a difference. The fallout from Eric's arrest was devastating in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. When Megan arrived home to find police cars in her driveway and her husband being led away in handcuffs, the sound of her sobbing echoed through the entire neighborhood. Mom, what's happening? Where are they taking Eric? What's going on? I had to tell my daughter that her husband had been planning to murder her mother for insurance money. I had to watch her face crumble as the reality of what Eric had been planning sank in. I had to hold her while she cried, knowing that our relationship might never fully recover from the betrayal that had nearly destroyed us both. Did you know? I asked her gently, after the police had finished taking her statement. About any of it? No, she whispered, and I believed her. I knew we were having money problems, but Eric said he was handling it. He said we just needed to be patient, that things would work out. I never imagined. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened when you tried to tell me something was wrong. You trusted your husband. That's what wives are supposed to do. But you're my mother. I should have trusted you too. The investigation revealed the full scope of Eric's deception. He'd forged documents, manipulated medical records, and created an elaborate paper trail designed to make my death look not just natural, but inevitable. Detective Santos told me later that it was one of the most sophisticated elder abuse cases she'd ever seen. If you hadn't figured it out when you did, she said, there's no question he would have succeeded. The combination of drugs he was planning to give you would have stopped your heart within hours, and the autopsy would have shown levels consistent with an accidental overdose at worst. Eric had also been stealing money from other elderly clients through his insurance work, using his position to identify vulnerable targets and manipulate their policies. I wasn't his first intended victim, just his most ambitious. The others had been smaller amounts, less dramatic methods, but the pattern was clear once investigators knew what to look for. During his trial, I had to testify about what I'd experienced, what I'd overheard, how I'd realized what was happening. The defense attorney tried to paint me as a paranoid old woman whose medical condition had made her imagine threats that didn't exist. But I wasn't the confused, declining woman Eric had been planning to kill. I was a retired nurse with 43 years of experience, clear-minded and sharp-tongued when I needed to be. When I took the stand and told my story in my own words, the jury heard exactly what I'd intended them to hear, the voice of a survivor who'd refused to become a victim. Mrs. Hayes, the prosecutor asked, what would you say to other elderly people who might be in similar situations? I looked directly at Eric as I answered. I'd tell them that growing old doesn't mean becoming helpless. I'd tell them to trust their instincts, to ask questions, to demand answers. And I'd tell them that they have every right to fight for their lives, no matter how old or sick or inconvenient someone else might think they are. Eric was sentenced to 25 years to life for attempted murder, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. The judge called his crime a particularly heinous violation of trust that strikes at the heart of family bonds and societal protection of our most vulnerable citizens. Megan and I had a long road ahead of us to rebuild our relationship. The guilt she carried for not believing me, for not seeing through Eric's manipulation, was almost as destructive as the original betrayal. But we're working on it, with the help of a family therapist who specializes in cases like ours. I moved back to my own house after the trial. Megan was worried about me living alone again, but I explained that I needed to reclaim my independence, my sense of self-determination. I'm not the same woman who moved in with you last year, I told her. I'm stronger now. More careful, maybe, but stronger. And I am stronger. Eric tried to make my death look natural, but instead, I made his lies look criminal. I turned his weapon against him, used his own arrogance and assumptions to trap him in a web he thought he was weaving around me. I attend church again now, regularly. I've reconnected with my old friends from the hospital. I volunteer at the senior center, teaching other elderly people how to recognize the signs of financial abuse and medical manipulation. My story has become a cautionary tale, a reminder that predators often wear familiar faces and speak in loving voices. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my front porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I think about how close I came to never seeing another sunset. How Eric's plan might have worked if I'd been just a little more trusting, a little less suspicious, a little more willing to accept that my declining health was simply the natural order of things. But I wasn't any of those things. I was Eleanor Hayes, retired nurse, widow, mother, grandmother, and survivor. I was a woman who'd spent her life fighting death in hospital rooms, and I wasn't about to let death win in my own bedroom, no matter how natural someone tried to make it look. The most important thing I learned from this experience is that evil often disguises itself as care. The person who's planning to hurt you might be the same person who brings you your coffee in the morning, who drives you to your doctor's appointments, who tells you they love you while they're measuring out the pills that will kill you. But love, real love, doesn't require your death to solve its problems. Real love doesn't see your existence as an obstacle to overcome. Real love doesn't whisper about making things look natural while planning your funeral. If you believe that truth always finds its way to the light, share this story. If you believe that justice can prevail even when it seems impossible, comment, Justice won. And if you believe that growing old doesn't mean giving up your right to fight for your life, remember Eleanor Hayes, the woman who refused to die quietly for someone else's convenience. Because in the end, that's exactly what they tried to make my death look like: convenient, natural, inevitable. Instead, I made their lies look criminal, their plan look foolish, and their assumptions look deadly wrong. I'm 71 years old now, and my heart condition hasn't improved. But I'm alive, I'm alert, and I'm angry enough to keep fighting for every day I have left. And that, I think, is the most natural thing of all.